Hello and welcome back once again to Rage Gaming and Diablo 4. Today we're talking builds, the top 10 builds in order in Season 2 currently. This is based on a variety of things like their ability to take on the new bosses, and of course Uber Lilith, and on their ability to push things like tier 100s, meaning how effective and survivable are they, how much of a challenge is it. Also important things like their speed clear ability for fast leveling to 100. Naturally, a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is from our own testing and discussion, but also a lot of other showcases, testing by streamers, creators, since we aren't able to look at it all. Please be sure to check out anyone we reference or credit today. And lastly, take all of this with a grain of salt. This is our subjective thoughts, reasoned to our best ability, so if it's even on the list, I think it's a top build in the game. Whether you personally think, say something should be 2 or 3, I don't think there's much in it. So let's start from the bottom at number 10. At number 10 then, we have the Whirlwind Barbarian. To say it simply, Whirlwind Barbarian is one of the best speed clearers in Season 2, due to the sheer effectiveness it has at mob clear. You are constantly spinning, running or spinning through dungeons and clearing pack after pack of mobs with no problem at all. It's a dream to have one of these in your 4-man farming team thanks to the shouts as you push higher levels all the way to 100 with your near complete builds. As I'll talk about throughout this video, a lot of these builds are going to mention the new unique Tibault's Will, which can generate 50 of your main resource every time you dash with an unstoppable effect, and on top of that you get a massive 40% times increase to all damage, which is just silly. So most of us are using Metamorphosis, the new vampiric power, to basically allow for this constant effect. And speaking of vampiric powers, in the case of Whirlwind you can make fantastic use of Bathe in Blood, which is all about channeled skills. Whirlwind is technically that, right? So while it's going and you're channeling it, you're also dealing another 40% times increased damage from just that, and there's a massive wall of damage reduction you get while you're spinning as another form of like the might aspect. This is all on top of the raw survivability of barbarians with a massive health pool. But if that's true, why are we at number 10? Well, it's because the moment we hit single target DPS, like say the final boss of a nightmare dungeon, or God forbid, a target boss or something like Uber Lilith, the cracks really begin to show, and the slow DPS of the build in that setting is revealed. So it's best when it's facing a group of enemies, but brought relatively low by its low single target output. It is a fantastic pick for speed leveling as a barb, however, and it's so good at that it deserves a spot, but other barb builds, let alone other classes, do more in a balanced way and therefore smoother way, since we're actually doing more than speed clearing in Season 2 with all the different types of content we do. At number 9 though, above that we have our double swing barbarian build, a really fun and effective dual wield playstyle, which is what the barbarian should be able to do. It's using 4 weapons after all. Barbarians are undeniably nuts in Season 2. The vampiric powers prove to be incredible, alongside the changes to damage buckets being just good for them too. With barbarians using overpower through that more consistently, we are seeing some silly numbers, and the double swing barb, while not the top pick, is a very impressive one. Overpower in general is really good this season, and Barb making use of it has pushed the class higher than we kind of expected. The Banished Lord's Talisman unique is an amulet that gives you a guaranteed overpower after you spend 300 resources, so you can guarantee a really hard smash on the right target with some intentional gameplay. Combined with the popular Tibault's Will after a meta dash, and you are just destroying. As a build, double swing Barb plays really fast, kind of like Whirlwind, just without the drawback that Whirlwind has when you come across like a strong elite or a boss, because double swing Barb destroys in single target. And Barbarian itself has so much health you're super survivable, letting you go toe-to-toe with packs of mobs, even in a tier 100, which would kill most of the classes. However, there is an awkward side to this, and that's what limits it. Its attacks in terms of AoE are quite small in radius, which makes mob clear awkward at certain times. It's like the opposite of Whirlwind. If you compare the build directly to Hammer of the Ancients, that's where the build just kind of falls down in terms of these rankings. Hammer of the Ancients hits harder, and it has an aspect that makes the AoE quake out, making it better from mob clear. So compared to that, it's just the worst build. It's just undeniable that the output and potential is huge here, and it's a very fun build. I just wonder whether we'll see an aspect or something to improve its AoE in Season 3. Moving on from that, we have number 8. This one goes to my main class, the Necromancer, and the infamous build. Damage over time is better in Season 2, and our shadow damage build is easily our best choice for that. Crucial improvements happened like our main legendary node, Wither, which now scales with intelligence, allowing for higher damage potential. There's that new unique in the form of X-Files Ring, which causes your damage over time effects to burst in AoE damage very often. And naturally, the build is all about lucky here, allowing for constant cooldown resetting, meaning constant blood mist during mob clear. The more targets there are, the better this build is. So it's a very smart choice if you're looking to speed clear, level to 100, or even push tier 100s, because, you know, you can reduce damage to 0, therefore it's quite survivable. But there is a negative side to this, and it's the single target DPS, which is a lot better in Season 2, that's undeniable, but it's also unfair to pretend that it competes with other top builds in this aspect. It really slows down when it hits the bosses or higher health pool enemies, meaning its single target DPS is not nearly as competitive as other builds towards the top end of this list. Next up at number 7 though, a very strong build that seems to go, well, a bit under the radar right now. This is the Ice Spike Sorcerer, a sleeper hit this season because, to be fair, it's overshadowed by the Ball Lightning Sorcerer. Josh believes this to be the second best Sorcerer build in the season from his testing, using both those new unique rings that turn the build to just silly. The rings are X-Files for damage over time, and more importantly, the blue rose for its 30% chance to form an exploding ice spike when dealing damage. But if the enemy's frozen, the chance is tripled. So during mob clear, that's happening constantly. The entire gameplay loop is tied to Blizzard. You drop a Blizzard on the enemies and just move on to the next pack because the last one is probably dead already. On single target, you just build Blizzard after Blizzard and the damage will build up and up and up to the point that it's melting the enemy. That's all not mentioning the survivability of the build and how it flies through dungeons at such a high pace. Sorcerers are moving quick and that's nothing new, but in Season 2, Sorcerers and their high element resistances is finally relevant. The 70% caps on elements is really important, and Sorcerers just have an easier time achieving that, especially when we consider their very strong shields, making them very tanky. The build is just freezing everything though, so during mob clear, you don't have to worry about reducing damage because they're stunned, so they're not dealing any. So while this build is incredible, the damage does take a moment to get going. It's very proc based, and that's about all the criticism I have. It's very overshadowed by Ball Lightning, which just does everything better, including higher DPS, which we'll soon discuss. But now it's finally time to talk Druid, which takes both 6th and 5th place for its incredible Tornado and Stormclaw builds. I think which you prefer and which you think is better is probably preference, but here's my reasoning. I put the Werewolf Tornado at number 6, and just above that 5, the Stormclaw build. Tornado Druid is better in its own ways though. It can be played at semi-range to avoid damage, it moves really quick, allowing for in and out combat movement, almost like a rogue, and the super speed can be fantastic for speed clearing, which comes in clutch if you're still leveling to say 100. The DPS is fantastic, it just requires a bit of build up for it to truly get going in single target, where you've got to build up a ton of tornadoes initially. The aspect Storm Chasers makes your tornadoes seek out up to 3 targets rather than doing whatever it wants. Its downsides are the fact that it's squishier than Stormclaw though, and it requires more awareness because of that when dealing with say tier 100 or endgame bosses initially as you first face them. The build up damage comes from needing to generate spirit to then spam out the tornadoes, relying heavily on procs and other spirit generators to dump out the nados. I think it is the clear winner if you're leveling to 100 and in the later game you'll be crushing nightmare tier dungeons, but I put the Stormclaw Druid slightly above it personally because of my talks with Cotton. It's an extremely easy build to play, even easier than the tornado. It turns your claw attack into a double attack, where you land the claw and a storm strike at the same time once you have the great staff of the crone. Compared to the tornado build, it's more melee focused though, but it boasts really high survivability to sort of counter that. It also doesn't remotely worry about spirit compared to tornado, just dumping out its damage through its 2 skills. Around that you've got a knockback option, you've got big healing potential, and a really strong CC in the form of Petrify, which also builds up staggers on bosses really well. I guess between the two, I see Stormclaw as a more popular pick because it gets going instantly. It's really tanky and a safer option, and I think easier to play by comparison. Between the Tornado and Stormclaw, their output is fantastic, their survivability is great. Either of these builds is going to do well in all content. But moving on, let's talk about number 4, which I give to Twisting Blades Rogue, the hyper-mobile, explosive burst build that has survived pre-season, Season 1, and now Season 2 the whole way as the best rogue build. This core gameplay is just too good. Incredible AoE burst, fantastic single target DPS, insane mobility, leading to fantastic clear times in a nightmare dungeon. The most popular and strongest version of this build is always up for debate, but I think imbuement is probably the most common answer. Between shadow imbuments for AoE and the poison imbuments to burn elite or boss health, you've always got a good option. And the class's consistent issue is the lack of damage resistance, which it makes up for in mobility. You want to avoid damage rather than try to mitigate it as a rogue. That leads to really fun, unique gameplay, but it's certainly a concern when you're facing a tier 100 and might get popped at any time. In Season 2 though, thanks to Tibault's will, enhancing the build much like Barrage, your mobility is rewarded with even more damage and a great resource regenerator. The new vampiric powers like Ravenous and Moonrise provide insane attack speed, you can fly around the situations, and you're spreading vampiric curses to targets constantly, which helps you deal even more damage. Rogue in this build in particular has to be a top pick for speed clearing and leveling to 100 in general. The only thing that holds it from the higher rankings on this list is just how strong the remaining builds are. Builds with higher burst, high DPS, safer and easier gameplay. The Twisting Blades Rogue is incredible, but the top 3 feel busted in their own ways. So, at number 3 above that, I have the Bone Spear Necromancer. As I've been talking about over the last week, this ridiculous spec is not nerfed to the ground or gone, it is still the most effective, well-rounded build for Necromancer to this day. Where Infamist is brilliant as damage builds up and you avoid lots of it through iframes. The Bone Spear doesn't even worry about that stuff. It just kills everything instantly with a few throws of high attack speed Bone Spears. Bone Spear makes up for its negatives by just dealing so much damage from such a great range that it just kind of overshadows the Infamist. It's jokingly called the one-button build, but that's very real. Its key resource generator is the exposed flesh aspect, giving you up to 50 essence on a lucky hit chance just by dealing damage to a vulnerable enemy. Bone Spear itself makes enemies vulnerable, so you throw the spears and make them weak, you throw the spears and restore your essence, you throw the spears and you kill everything. With the new unique Tibault's Will, your meta dashes are used to apply curses, but also they're going to raise your damage by 40% times and also restore your essence, which is a big deal. One of the way Bone Spears deals its damage is by having higher essence when throwing them, which means the unique restores a ton and helps that happen. Slap on a pair of boots that allow for dashing more often and you're doing it even more. It absolutely crushes content, be that speed clearing or leveling, which by the way, Bone Spear was the first 4 level 100s in Season 2, and it also destroys in single target, boasting close to the highest DPS potential out of every build in the game. You can clear tier 100s by attacking things from so far away they can't hurt you, or when you reach uber unique level for a build, the damage is so reduced and your damage is so high and consistent that all you do is right click everything and it just dies. It's just good at everything. It's once again my top Necromancer build, but above that, it's 2 more builds. At second place overall, I put the Hammer of Ancients Barbarian. Let's cut straight to the point. Recently, Rob2628 landed a single hit of over 1 billion. In one hit, over 1 billion damage, which would kill any enemy in the entire game instantly. But it was under silly circumstances where they were clearly setting this up. Fairer showings where they're doing much less setup is around 400 million damage, which kills everything. So it has one of the strongest single hit potentials in the game. With the new way Overpower works and how more builds have access to it, it's taken a lot of people by surprise just how busted this has been for Barbarians. Combine that with the Banished Lord's Talisman, as we mentioned earlier, and you can push the damage of the Overpower even more. Rob was using the uber unique, the Grandfather two-handed sword, to further raise the potential, which is less attainable for your average player. I imagine a build like this is going to see more regular hits of 40 to 100 million as those spikes, which is still insane. And outside of the silly damage it deals, it's very good in mob clear, crunching through dungeons because nothing can survive it, and Barb can kind of bully its way through a tier 100 thanks to its big health pool and raw survivability. Attacks that would kill every other build bar one, it kind of just tanks on the shoulder and heals through. So if not for my number 1 build, it would be at the top. Which brings us to number 1, which is Ball Lightning Sorcerer. Earlier in the season, we knew something was up when Josh was playing this and dealing 5 times the damage we were at like level 60 and 70. The gap in power just got worse and worse as we leveled though, and then he soloed an Uber Lilith at level 85. You compare the tier 100 gameplay of other top builds who are like leaping and dashing around, killing enemies before they can kill the player. The Ball Lightning Sorcerer is basically not paying attention, walking through dungeons while everything just dies that goes near it. It's because the balls rotate around the sorcerer, you don't actually have to aim at anything. You activate them and just walk through. And by walk, I mean fly. You're sprinting and teleporting. Every elite or pack or even boss just crumbles. The single target DPS is insane. You build up the balls so much that it's like a full-on blinding ball that the player is standing in the middle of, and it burns Uber Lilith's health bar like acid. Whatever it is, Uber Lilith, new bosses, safely clearing tier 100s faster than anyone. It's just like the best. There's only one thing that another build does better than it, and that's the big number in one hit in regards to Barbarian. But that hardly matters. It kills things just as fast on average and clears mobs much smoother. The challenge of playing Ball Lightning Sorcerer isn't what target to consider or how to take a fight. It's just going near the enemy and watching it die, or how fast can you actually reach the end of the dungeon because nothing's going to stop you. There is some variance in the builds for Ball Lightning though. Josh was telling me about 3 distinct builds that are in talks. Pure Arc Lash, where the balls come from 100% unstable currents. There's the Pure Ball Lightning, where the balls come from hard casting it and stacking mana management. And lastly, the Hybrid, where you go both Arc Lash and Ball Lightning and just mix them. But whatever way you go, whatever you argue is best, all 3 are stupidly effective because Ball Lightning is stupidly effective. Sorcerers have suffered in pre-season and season 1, so I do not begrudge them this, what I believe, undisputed top spot for season 2. But there you have it. That's my little look and overview of the best builds and how I'd rank them against one another. There's actually even more builds that could happily fit on this list, S tiers or whatever you call them, but these are the ones that I wanted to talk about. For now though, I've been Hollow, you've been you, thank you for watching, see you next time.
Josh, Cotton, and Hollow with the videos, dropping the humor like a hammer on your tippy toes, bringing entertainment on a daily arrangement to take our insanity and turn it into entertainment. Yes, I said entertainment twice, to reiterate that it is nice to look into your faces on a mostly daily basis when you let us in your homes to make the whole world a stage. Goodbye.